Hello everyone and welcome to this week's ExtendScript tutorial. In this one, it's going to be applicable for any program you want. It's just going to be a random RGB generator, and it's going to be able to generate any random RGB values between the values of 0 to 1 or 0 to 255, depending if you give it a value of false or true. And of course, you can head on over to my NT Productions GitHub, linked in the description, to check out all of the code and a lot of other cool repositories. So just to show you what this script is going to do, we can run the alert random RGB function and either pass false if we want to get a value from 0 to 1 for each of the channels, or true if we want from 0 to 255 for each of the channels. So right now we have it set to false, and if I run it, I'm going to get 0.7, 0.34, 0.54, and those are for my RG and B values. Now if I give it the value of true, it's going to give me anything between 0 and 255. And of course, if you wanted to, you can go ahead and expand this script into include alpha channels, but for the most part, we just want to manipulate RGB values in most cases. So let's go ahead and open up a new JavaScript file and write this function. I'm going to say function generate random RGB, and what we're going to include is an argument called normal. And this is just going to say, are we going to normalize it to what most people use, which is 0 to 255 for RGB values. If it's not normal, we want to get 0 to 1.0 because that's what After Effects deals with sometimes as well. So depending on what bit depth or program you're using, you can get the value you need. So the first thing we're going to check is if normal is a real thing. We're going to check if it's true, basically. And what we're going to do is when we call the function, give it true or false. And what this is just checking is if it's true. If you wanted to start it with if it's not true, you would say exclamation mark to invert the logic. So this is saying if it's normal, and then we need an else statement if it's not normal. So if you want, you could go ahead and add in a comment saying normal is equal to 0 to 255. And then this is going to be not normal, which is going to be anywhere from 0.0 or a few more decimal places than that really, to 1.0. And anything we return in here needs to be with those values. So now we need to return the RG and B values. We're trying to be as efficient with our code space as possible. So instead of creating variables, randomizing the values, and then returning them, I'm just going to return the function that randomizes it. So we're going to want to return an array full of the R, G, and B values. So we need an array with 3 things in it. So we're going to be returning an array. We need to return brackets. And we'll also do the same for the not normal case. And now essentially we're going to have 3 values, so we'll need 2 commas in each of these return statements. And for the first R value, we're going to say math.random, and we need to give it parentheses so it can run that. We're going to say times 255, and then what that's going to do is generate a random number between 0 and 1.0 and multiply it by 255. So if the random number generated is, say, 1, which is the maximum value, it's going to multiply that by our new max value, which turns into 255, which is accurate. If the value was, say, extremely small, like 0.05, really close to black, and we multiply that by 255, we're going to get the scaled version of that, so it's in a range from 0 to 255 instead of 0 to 1.0. So essentially we're converting a small range to our larger range by multiplying it by the largest number in the range. But what we also want to do is go ahead and say plus 0. In the original example, I used plus 0, which now that I'm looking at it might not actually matter whether you put that or not, because adding 0 does absolutely nothing. So we can actually modify this code even more, and I'm going to go ahead and push a pull request on my GitHub to update that as well. So now we have math.random times 255. And what we can do is go ahead and paste this 3 times, because we want to do it 3 times, one for the red, green, and blue channels. And then literally the same thing for down here for the not normal version. I'm going to copy and paste, but instead of multiplying by 255 and going up to that bigger range, we're just going to say times 1. And again, you might be noticing the same thing. I'm noticing that this can be reduced even further by not having times 1, because multiplying anything by 1 will give you itself. If this generates a value of 0.5 and it times it by 1, you get 0.5 back. So let's go ahead and further reduce the amount of writing we have here. And now let's go ahead and call this function and see what we can get. So I'll say generate random RGB, and we'll start with true. We're going to say normal is equal to true. And I'm going to alert what this gives us. If I run it, you can see I need to get rid of these parentheses at the end here. Try and run it. We're going to get a value, 74.49, 94.57, and 108.702. Now what we want to do furthermore is actually have these be just regular integers without the decimals. If you would like to have very specific calculations with all these decimals, you can, but I like to see just a plain number without all those decimals. So for each of these values, I'm going to say math.floor and enclose the entire statement in parentheses, the math random statement. And what math.floor does is just floors it, which means that it gets rid of all the decimals. In the case of the not normal one, we want the decimals because between 0 and 1, there's only one main integer, so we need all the detail we can get. So now if we go ahead and run it, we're going to get our random numbers and their integers without decimals when we give it true, and every time we generate it, it's going to be these random numbers, which is equivalent to a random color. If I put in false, we're now going to get random decimals between the value of 0 and 1.0. So yeah, I think this is actually a great update to the script, and I'm glad I recorded this so that I could modify it even further and make it more efficient. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, make sure to leave the thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section down below. And of course, hit subscribe to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly, usually on Monday and Thursday. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.